So I'm probably one of the few people in the room who's currently unemployed, so I'm truly independent. So I've spent my first 10 years places like The Guardian, and when it was IPC, do you remember those days, IPC? And then the last 10 years kind of more in the ad tech world, so and currently sort of discovering myself. Most of the intro was done there, but yeah, this was on the back of a forum that we did back in September where we were talking about what the opportunity is for publishers around data. So some of the conversation was around how it could be used to drive creative improvements and insight. Some of it was around best practice in terms of measurement, and then some of it was also around how publishers are coming together to work in unity around data. And so that's the kind of bit that my part of the presentation is going to focus more on, is what is that opportunity to work together and to create some kind of bigger data entity. And John's presentation, so a business like Captify, I mean, incredibly successful, fast-paced business that is successfully using publisher data and turning that into insight, but also kind of actionable insight that's driving brilliant results. I mean, I work very closely with them and know them well. Great business, but actually it's sort of partly that's the kind of lost opportunity for publishers. That's just there's another company that's just done that kind of, instead of a group like the AOP. So it's time to explore that opportunity. Now, I won't be the last and first person to highlight the huge revenues going to a couple of the big players in the space of Google and Facebook. I don't want to get too hung up on kind of how much that revenue picture is, but I suppose also kind of, but more why. And so they're obviously businesses that have huge scale, but they're also businesses that are driven through data and insight. So they manage to engage their customers, being media agencies and brands, through insight. But that insight also turns into product, and product that can be actionable, that can deliver brilliant results. And I think as publishers who have lots of valuable data, it's important to know that it's most important to know that the bar has been raised. And so I think in terms of how you engage your customers and how effective it needs to be, this is why I think this part is important. But I suppose the bit that's almost a bit scarier for me is that let's say it's 70 or 65% goes to Google and Facebook and there's 35% left. There's a hell of a lot of people fighting for that 35%, and I think that's the bit that's almost scarier. I mean, look at the names on the sides here, a lot of the sponsors. But one of the key things that some of the bigger players have in common in this space as well is also their access to data and insight. And so again, for publishers to be working in a kind of an older model of, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, but an older model where everything's around the sort of quality of the environment, but I think the level of insight and data capability that these companies have means that there has to be a way for publishers to start to work together, in my opinion. If you speak to most agencies, they acknowledge the fact that their continued investment in Google and Facebook is damaging, or not damaging, but are they feeding the monster that's going to potentially kill them? Most agencies that you'd speak to are very worried about it, but they carry on doing it, and they carry on doing it regardless. And I guess that's because A, it's easy, B, it works, C, it's because of the data side of it. It's interesting. It's interesting to the people they're selling to their customers. Everyone wants to have a conversation around data at the moment. So I think that's very important to understand, that while agencies should be investing more in premium publishers, and they know they should be, they don't really have a duty to, but they should definitely be. I don't know how many people saw this stat last week, which I was quite surprised around. But if you look outside of Google and Facebook, that the industry actually shrunk in the first half of 2016 for everyone else. So it's kind of like we've got to do something about it. It's going to get fiercer. And I also think there's a piece around how once publishers have come together and built a stronger data proposition, how they could then start to work in partnership with the likes of Google and Facebook to build a stronger collaboration there. So the solution, or kind of my view of what's required, first of all, it needs to be more compelling. I think the sales story from a publisher perspective needs to be more engaging. It needs to be more driven by insight. And it has to be something that can then be actioned, insight that can be actioned. And I think to do that in collaboration, for me, sounds like that's going to be more exciting for an agency than to have those conversations individually with every publisher. It needs to be easier, whether that's buying packages of sites together or packages of audiences together. No doubt agencies don't want to have to make 200 different buys. If they can buy packages of publishers and their audiences, that's more efficient. It can mean hopefully it's more effective. But the flip side of that is, and when I talk to agencies on more on the trading desk side, so on the programmatic side, the one piece they say around all alliances that have kind of let them down so far is the fact that it's not transparent. So they want to be able to buy efficiently, they want to be able to buy packages of publishers, but the lack of transparency is a big hurdle that needs to be overcome. So I think that's something, maybe there'll be time for some questions around that. And then I think finally, obviously, Google and Facebook as well, they set the bar in terms of performance and effectiveness. So the data solution, agencies want scalable, actually they want scalable custom data. They want stuff they can't find elsewhere. They want stuff they can't get from third parties, but that can be actioned in a meaningful way. And now when I say meaningful, I think that's stuff that can influence the creative process, that can influence the planning process, but then can also be actioned and bought. So hopefully we'll have a bit more time to talk about this afterwards. We'll see where we get to. And I suppose I wanted you guys to think about some of the potential barriers. Don't dwell on them too much, but maybe this is some areas for discussion. So in bringing publishers together to create some kind of data alliance, clearly it's a strong proposition, but we know that there's a lot of egos and agendas that need to be overcome. In my experience of any alliances so far, there's also usually a lot of restrictions, whether that's advertiser block lists or everyone's got their own sort of rules they want to play by. I also think that agencies will demand transparency, so how transparent are people prepared to be? And then there's the conversation around, do publishers have the technology capability or resource? This, again, goes back to John's point around partnering with the right people, because the expectations have been set really high in terms of what data can be from an insight perspective, but also driving results. So that's my bit for now. We're gonna